This is the Jackson Neill Music Podcast. Welcome back. I'm your host, Jackson Neill, here on Sunday, July 14th, 2019. Today, I'm going to be talking about Jaden Smith's new album, ERYS, and my initial reaction to listening to the project. But first, I just want to remind everyone that this podcast is available on all of your favorite platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and SoundCloud. It's also available on jacksonneillpodcasts.com, the go-to spot for everything that I publish. So, a little over a week ago, Jaden Smith released his brand new album, ERYS, the follow-up to his 2017 debut, SYRE. Now, he's had some music in between then, the Sunset Cool tapes, definitely forgettable besides the opening track, Soho. He had the EP, ERYS is Coming, which one of the tracks is featured in the deluxe version of ERYS, and he also had SYRE, the electric album. And I think that going into this album, the one thing that really helped me, having listened to before, was both the ERYS is Coming EP with 3 tracks, because I think that really showed a lot about this upcoming project, as well as the SYRE electric album. And I kind of want to start off by saying that his opening album, SYRE, was one that definitely, I think, I'm not alone in this one, caught me by surprise. I mean, when I heard that Jaden Smith was releasing an album, especially a hip-hop album, I never heard him rap before. And I mean, I'm thinking Karate Kid, I'm thinking that kind of stuff for Jaden Smith. So it wasn't something that I was expecting a whole lot out of, but I was going to listen to anyway because your curiosity gets the best of you. And then I listened to it and was actually very, very impressed. Because while it was a debut that certainly had its flaws in certain areas, I know people have criticized tracks like Lost Boy or things like that, I think overall it was very, very strong. It was an EP, an LP, that showed that he had this pretty unique style. I mean, it just made me think of if Kid Cudi, A$AP Rocky, and Tyler, the Creator, all just were conjoined into one person, it would sound like Jaden Smith. And it's kind of funny that all 3 of those are on this new album for Jaden, because those are obviously his biggest influences. You can hear it throughout his music that those guys really, really inspire his current musical style. But I thought that the combination of this kind of the current day trap element with some of the kind of more rock, I guess you would call it, elements, with the guitars and the other kind of percussion on SYRE, it was certainly interesting. It was different. And I think a lot of times that's what a lot of people just look for in music, especially myself, is that can you stand out? Can you give a project that is not like everything else? And SYRE did that for the most part. It was a little bit long, and going into ERYS, those were kind of my thoughts on his debut. And now, listening to his second album and hearing, okay, it's been about a year and a half, close to 2 years now, since that debut. And I think the first thing that jumped out at me, obviously, was this similar opening. Instead of blue, it was pink this time. And just like blue, incredible layers of production and just overall quality of those first 4 tracks, P-I-N-K, and they flow effortlessly one to the other. I mean, that could be an EP in of itself. It's so concise, so good, and just really, really shows, I think, his talent as a musician. And I think after that is where I start to wonder some things, why the rest of the album can't be more like pink, or like more like blue in case of SYRE, where following those 4 really hard-hitting, in terms of just how much is packed into those 4 tracks, it kind of gets a little drawn out later in this album. And I think that was the biggest thing for ERYS listening through. As I looked through my notes, there was so much trap on this album. And while I certainly expected it, I mean, you can't listen to ERYS is Coming and not expect that there's going to be some trap on this album, because he obviously has been experimenting with those sounds. I was a little dismayed at how much of it there was, because while there are certain points where I think Jaden Smith does the whole trap sound very, very well. I think that drum line that he has a lot of times throughout the album, I think he's able to provide some solid flows over top of it and just sound pretty good. The only problem I had was that I felt like there was definitely too much of that. And when you look at how long this album is, I mean, it's over an hour without the deluxe edition. So when you look at just how long this is total, I think if you were to say, okay, this could be more concise, the parts you would cut out would be all those parts where he's rapping in that trap kind of style. But other than that, I found this album to be a little bit more darker than SYRE, whereas I found SYRE to be a little bit, more optimistic at certain points. Obviously, definitely tracks there where, you kind of, like, I think Lost Boy of not necessarily being negative, but you're certainly not very uplifting either. This one definitely goes onto the more darker route. And I really like that. I really liked the overall feeling of this project. It feels very, when you listen to it, I guess this is one of the biggest compliments I could give to it, is that it feels like you're listening to this full body of work that kind of transports you to another place. And what I mean by that is that even though the songs obviously sound different, I mean, there's certain tracks in there that are just absolutely go out. I mean, that one point where he goes into the whole punk theme, or then when he transitions into Summertime in Paris, there's these times where obviously the songs sound different from each other, but it all kind of feels like it fits into that same overall concept. And in terms of the concept of SYRE and ERYS, I will say I don't know it. I don't know it completely. I really liked SYRE. It wasn't an album that I've listened to countless times, where I've dissected every lyric, and same with ERYS. I've listened to several times now that's been out, but I haven't dissected every single lyric, looked through the different concept lines. And while there's certain things that you can kind of pick up through between the two projects, I mean, the whole idea of ERYS being SYRE backwards, and then there's certain times where he has these duality kind of ideas, and now they're not insanely deep or anything. There's just like little duality where he mentions something along the lines of saying he wants like only big drip only, or like after an introspective part, it has a voice come in and says, "Oh, big drip only," and I'm guessing that's SYRE's voice or ERYS's voice, or whichever one of the two. So there's obviously a connection, and I think that's a big thing to quote, is that there's a connection between these two projects. I don't know how deep it is, because while sonically there's a very cool connection, and this is obviously the spiritual successor to it, and he obviously experiments. I mean, the whole Punk Sound Like on Fire department, that has really caught me by surprise. And while it's not fully formed, I mean, it was pretty jarring, and I even liked it as a listener. But I think where the theme kind of comes up a little short might be the lyrics. Like, I think on one of the songs that I drip, or however you pronounce that, the one big line for him is when he says "fuck them interviews," and yeah, that's kind of like a calling card line. Like, that's a line to get behind, but it's not very original, and it's not very telling. And I know that song isn't supposed to be introspective, but I would at least, but that line right there just kind of was like, oh, okay, I feel like I've heard this in countless rap songs, or other quotes that I felt like were trying to get a little too deep. The true wealth is knowledge. Okay, I mean, I understand what he's trying to say there, but it's definitely like you're trying to go introspective, but it definitely falls flat at points. And that's one lyric that I really kind of pulled out listening to and going, oh man, that's a little corny. That's not necessarily completely introspective, but I think that while it does fall flat in some points, I think the key thing to remember is that it doesn't fall flat all the time. There are points where it really, really, really does come through. I mean, and there's other songs on here that he kind of display, that he didn't really, other talents, I guess I would say, that he didn't really display on SYRE, but he displays on this project. And I think Summertime in Paris really is the big one, where Summertime in Paris sounds like this kind of just catchy summertime hit. I really like it. He has a catchy hook. It's with Willow, and I just think that it's a song that really, really works well. And I remember listening to it, and thinking, man, this could really be a radio song. This could be the song that gets airplay on radio stations, and not just hip-hop radio stations either. I think it kind of has that hip-hop pop crossover appeal right now, while still being, unique enough. I mean, I wouldn't say it's the most unique song I've ever heard, but it's also a song where I listen to it, I'm like, I can't think, it's not like a carbon copy of any other track either. So I think that was a pretty impressive, listening to Summertime in Paris and saying, wow, that obviously SYRE had Icon, which was the big single to come off that project, but Icon necessarily isn't a pop song. Icon is just a really, really hype hip-hop song that caught on because it gets you really going. Well, Summertime in Paris is more of that hip-hop track, like I said, that has more of a pop crossover appeal. Another thing I wanted to touch on was about the overall arc of this album, because it felt like it was a very trap-heavy first half, and then especially once you get past Pink and then leading up into Summertime in Paris, there's a lot of time in there where there's just that trap sound. And I think if you're listening now, you can kind of pick up on my overall, I wouldn't say distaste for trap, but in terms for Jaden Smith, just the idea that is not his element. That isn't. I don't think that is what separates Jaden from anyone else. I think it's just the current trend in hip hop right now, and a lot of artists do it very, very well. And I don't think Jaden Smith does it poorly. I think he does it very well. I think he's very good at it. But I don't think that's where you're going to, as an artist, be distinct. Say, okay, this is why I listen to a Jaden Smith project. I listen to a Jaden Smith project more for those, he incorporated punk on this, or he has more of a rock flair on this with this kind of percussion, or wow, I mean, this just sounds different. This just sounds more alternative. This is something I just don't hear with everybody else. And that's kind of why I get onto that kind of, there's tangents about not really liking the trap sound so much for Jaden Smith, is because he's not bad at it. I mean, I think he's good. It's just, do something a little bit different, because he obviously has the talent to do so. And then on the back half, past Summertime in Paris, I thought I was getting into this more kind of like darker, introspective time. But then at certain points, that kind of falls flat. But there are certain tracks on there where it sounds like, it's going to be really, really good. Like, especially like Blackout. I love the guitar strings and just the overall sound of it. But I kind of wonder, a lot of times Jaden Smith goes into this kind of flip-flop stage of between confidence or getting quote-unquote stuck in his feelings. And I think he's best on the biggest ends of the spectrum. I think when he embraces confidence, you get something like Icon. When he's really going more that emotional route, you get something like Blackout, a track that I like off this project. So I think he needs to just, there's this huge spectrum of Jaden Smith as an artist where he can go all these different directions. And the key for him as an artist, I think, is to stick to opposite ends of that spectrum and develop this sound that includes a lot of it. Don't aim for a lot of it by going right into the middle and just kind of sounding a little bit of everything. Go all the way in one direction. Go all the way down that punk element for a track, and let's hear what it sounds like. And yeah, it may not sound like any other track on the project, but that's okay, because I really like it. I think that there's potential there, and I think that you don't want to get stuck as an artist in just this middle ground. And I think Jaden Smith at certain points does, but at other points it flourishes by just being completely different. Just some other overall things that I kind of noticed that necessarily weren't big takeaways, but I just thought were kind of comedic, was the overall use of that like bleep out sound effect. Where in a rap song you think about like a bleep sound effect, like bleeping out somebody, like a specific name or something. I could not count how many times I heard that on this album. It's just kind of a little funny thing I noticed about Jaden Smith's music. He really likes to use that sound effects. Also, really, A$AP Rocky really delivered on this project. I loved his two verses on, I guess that's pronounced Chateau, and the Ghost remix. I remember listening to Breakfast last time on SYRE and thinking, man, I guess A$AP Rocky didn't really think that Jaden Smith was gonna this album was gonna be this big and this good, or else he would have given a real verse. And I think A$AP Rocky delivered twice on this project. That he absolutely killed both of those times. I'm not the biggest A$AP Rocky fan in terms of his music. I mean, I like his stuff, but I'm definitely not the biggest fan. But I would definitely say he definitely killed it. I loved, and I think he really does a good job with Jaden Smith. I think that's so cool to hear them together, because like I said, Kid Cudi, Tyler the Creator, A$AP Rocky, those seem like the three guys that really comprise Jaden's influences. And I think Jaden and Tyler on Noise were amazing. I think Kid Cudi and Jaden kind of stepped on each other's toes a little bit on that track they had together, but overall were pretty solid. Jaden and A$AP Rocky are a perfect fit. I mean, it's so seamless listening to a song between those two. Obviously A$AP Rocky's dealing with his legal troubles right now, but you think about those kind of collaborations and like those collaborative like mixtapes, those ones I dream I could have these two artists collab for a project, or even just an EP. I would love to hear what a 5-track EP with Jaden Smith and A$AP Rocky together would sound like. I think those two guys just are such a match made in heaven in terms of tracks, that they would sound perfect. They just sound perfect together. And I guess I want to end this off by saying that Jaden Smith, I guess he's now ending this career arc. I mean, that's what I would assume. I'd kind of recommend it between this whole SYRE and ERYS thing. I mean, the whole name of ERYS is SYRE backwards. It's a little weird, but I get it. I respect it. I respect whenever artists have these kind of cool concepts. As fans, you can follow that. So it looks like it's probably the end of that kind of career arc for Jaden Smith. And this album, it just makes me... It's an album that I'm definitely going to go back and listen to, throughout the coming months, and just find other little things. I mean, one thing I didn't even get to was the whole electric guitar and that whole electric sound they took off the SYRE Electric album so well, and really, I think, developed that to an awesome place on this album. So on the whole, it keeps me interested in him as an artist. And I can't wait to see what his next concept is, because he's obviously an artist who is taking the time to think things out, is taking the time to kind of craft these overall themes throughout his music. And you got to remember, I mean, it seems like Jaden Smith has been around forever, but he's in his early 20s. I think he's like 20 or 21. He's a young guy. It's not like he's this fully formed artist or anything. And I think that's the biggest thing that people need to realize with Jaden Smith, is that he's basically like one of those XXL freshmen at this point. He's not just because he's been around in the public conscious for his entire life because of his parents. That doesn't mean that he can't be a 20 or 21-year-old just making music. And how this is his second album. This is just his second full length. So I think you see tremendous growth from SYRE to ERYS. So I can't wait to see what that next step is, and how he just continues to grow as an artist, because I think there's a lot. He's certainly doing a lot right now. He certainly sounds awesome right now, but there's still a ton of room to grow. And I mean, he's one of those guys where no one else really sounds like him. He's kind of his own thing, and that always really excites me. And that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Jackson and Neill Music Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe and rate this podcast on your favorite platforms, because that does a lot to help grow the show. Remember, new episodes every Sunday. For more episodes, go down into the show notes and visit the link to jacksonneillpodcast.com. There you'll find all of the episodes to this music podcast, as well as the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast and my interview series, Anything Goes with Jackson Neill. New episodes of the Sports Podcast on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, with Anything Goes coming on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you're a big fan of the show, maybe consider becoming a subscriber on Patreon. For just a couple dollars a month, you can get access to bonus segments from both my sports and music podcasts, as well as bonus content from my interviews on Anything Goes. I write, record, and produce these podcasts myself as a full-time college student, so any little bit of support really, really does go a long way. Link to Patreon down in the show notes. if you want to stay up to date on everything I'm doing, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at JacksonNeill20. Today's show music is by Analog by Nature with their song CDK Sunday. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you all next time.